Hello and welcome everyone. A very good afternoon. I, Sonali, on behalf of Economic Times, would like to take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to everyone to the live panel discussion on design-led growth, how creative refresh helps unicorns stay ahead of the game. In today's session, we have leading growth leaders on board who run tight marketing and creative operations and refresh their visual communication at record speeds. On that note, I would like to extend a very special thanks to our esteemed panelists for taking their time out, and a big thanks to our attendees. I'll go ahead with Vivek Elawat, GM Digital Marketing Cast 24. Hi, Vivek. Would you please turn your video on? Happy to have you here, Vivek. Vivek manages all aspects of user acquisition through various digital channels for both car and bike verticals, aligned with business objectives and KPIs. He has around 15 years of experience in digital marketing and has worked with various domains. Welcome you on board, Vivek.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thanks a lot. Moving on next to Rohit. We have with us Rohit Bhardwaj, who is the creative director marketing for Make My Trip and Go IPO. Welcome on board, Rohit. Pleasure to have you. Rohit has over 19 years of experience across different mediums and platforms. In his current role, he oversees a team of multidisciplinary designers working on domains such as visual design, UI, UX, print ads, and motion graphics, among others. Pleased to have you, Rohit. Moving on to our next panel members, we have with us Mohit Jain, who is head brand and marketing, Udan. Pleasure to have you on board, Mohit. Mohit has over 12 years of experience in building global brands and businesses. His experience spans across all commercial functions of sales, category, and marketing roles while working both with big corporations for global consumer brands and tech startups. Good to see you here, Mohit. Indeed, an honor. Moving
Hi,
on
Sonali.
next.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to our next panel member, we have Rajab Cooler, who is the creative head brand Urban Company. Hi, Rajab. Good to see you here.
Hi, Sonali. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome on board. Rajat is a creative design professional with over 14 years of experience. His experience encompasses a wide variety of work in brand identity and system design, print and digital design, environmental graphics, and information design. Welcome, Rajat. Moving on next to Srijan Virmani, Manager Digital Marketing, Coca-Cola India. Welcome on board, Srijan.
Thank you, Sonali. Hi, everyone.
Good to see you here. Srijan is a digital marketing specialist with a demonstrated history of working in tech and FMCG industries. He specializes in app performance, D2C, and digital transformation. In his previous stint, he worked with Zomato, where he was leading digital marketing. Good to have you, Srijan. Moving on to our final panel member and also the session moderator for today, Satej Sirur, CEO Rocatium. Hi, Satej. Welcome on board.
Sonali. Hi, everyone.
Satej is passionate about startups, technology, and the positive impact startups can create with technology. He has a decade of experience spanning multiple roles across multiple geographies. Welcome on board, Satej. Just before we move ahead, I would like to lay on some ground rules for the audience who have joined us. The discussion will be on for a duration of an hour. If you have any questions during the course of the panel, please feel free to post the same in the Q&A box. We will be taking some questions towards the end of the discussion. Please keep your questions related to the subject being discussed and mention the panelists to whom you would like to address your question. On that note, I would like to hand it over to Stage to please take the proceedings ahead.
Thank you, Sonali. Thank you to all the panelists and a big thanks to the audience as well. So I wanted to start off by first unpacking the title. There is a lot going on here. So we talk about design-led growth in the beginning, and then we talk about creative refresh. Now, the audience that is attending is quite technical. They are marketing and design folks from different e-commerce, consumer internet, and some B2B companies as well. So they understand a lot of this. What they might not understand is design-led growth. Right. Today in the panel, we have people who are both design experts. We have marketing experts. Together, they are working to deliver growth. And why design plays an important role, mostly I personally also want to hear from the panelists. But for all of us, we want to know, and as consumers of these products, we know how important visuals are in our purchase journey, whether it is downloading apps by looking at ads or social content, whether it is the creatives that you see within the app that introduce new products, new services, show you offers, or the push and email that goes out, all of it is design. So if we think of design as purely aesthetic and art, that's different from the design that we are talking about right now, which is design that is intended to convince somebody to take an action. As we are spending more and more time on mobile devices, as we are bombarded with more and more, all of these unicorns here, they all want your time. They all want you to download something, purchase something. So they are all competing with each other, even if they're not in the same industry, because we are all competing with Netflix and the Facebooks and sleeping and time with friends. Visual content that way plays extremely important role, but let me not talk about it. Our esteemed panelists will talk more about it. So before I get on to that, a big thanks to the audience for coming in and showing that growth mindset, wanting to grow your businesses. And I'm heartening. It's very heartening to see both small companies as well as very large companies employees joining here, because they all want to grow. And especially here we have unicorns, and why we specifically talked about unicorns is we think their life is easy, their life is harder than others. They have to grow faster than others, they have bigger targets than others, and there is much more for them to lose, which is why we thought we can listen to them. So with this, we'll get started. The core part of this panel session will be something very interesting and different, which is all of these experts are going to unpack and unravel some of the campaigns that they have done, walk through some design decisions that they made, walk through some of the reasons behind those campaigns. So most of our time will spend in that. But before that, just want to hear from every panelist about what role creative content plays, where they are using visual content, and then specifically creative refresh when it comes to taking an existing campaign where some visuals are delivering results. Why are they making those changes, and does it even deliver any results, right? So just want to start off, Rohit, with you. Would love to hear that.
Yeah, hi. So rightly said, visual content really defines the direction, and it sets the tone for the audience. And it also, gives an instant identity to the brand. It drives more engagement. So images usually drive more than only attention, as they also drive user engagement. And also, visual content helps break and explain a lot of information. For example, when you're doing infographic charts and flows, you have to show a lot of information, and then you break it down and show it in the form of visuals. So it creates varied opportunities for user generated content. So one of the example is our trip ideas as a product in our case, where users can share their experiences of their trips and get featured on our product. So yes, these are the few things that I want to talk about.
Thanks so much, Rohit. Rajat, would love to hear from you the role that visual content plays, especially as a design person. What role do you play in growth, and also introducing to the audience how you are doing creative refresh, or why you are even doing it? I would love to hear.
Right. Thanks for that, Satej. Like Rohit also said, right, design as a commodity is becoming more and more important as we go forward in life. Our consumers are consuming a lot of information online, and the level of consumption and the attention span is becoming smaller and smaller. Your brand and your business has to stand out. And in order to stand out, while the business may have a certain reputation in the market, it also needs to be packaged better. That's where design comes in as a strategic commodity. At Urban Company, we work on design which leads to business and growth by using a system called building a design consistency through systems design. What systems design essentially means is that you build a certain bank of visual assets. And how you use those visual assets is a combination of user engagement, moving a particular vertical ahead, or if you're trying to increase sales, or if you're trying to build your user base. Depending on the kind of need, those visual assets are arranged in a certain strategic way and built into key templates, which then become key parameters moving forward. Within those templates, you also reinvent and create children out of each parent template, and then that becomes a cascading network of design consistency across a brand through these key templates, and that's what drives visual content, and that's what actually leads to a creative growth.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Rajat. Now, Vivek, would love to hear the same from you as well.
So yeah, Satish, thanks for setting up the agenda, and I would like to continue with where Rajat and Rohit, were explaining the things about the importance of creative. they are really the face of the brand. It's the first touch point with the consumer is the creative, right? Only from that touch point you will be able to deliver what your brand is actually, what we can deliver to user, and because of those creative things only we are able to bring back the user to our brand, and only that is the top of the funnel, without which it is really impossible to actually gauge the what actual performance we are getting out of it, and obviously you always have to play around with those creatives, and I mean there is so much juice around that. It's your creativity that comes into big picture, every now and then, how you are playing around all those things, maybe in terms of messagings, maybe in terms of all those colors and variations. But yes, I would say it's really really important.
Wonderful. So, Mohit, among the panelists, you are slightly different in that your audience is slightly different persona in terms of being B2B. So, would love to hear, do you agree with the rest of the panelists? Do you have a very counter view? And, just floor is yours.
Yeah, no, thanks, Satish, I think, for setting the context. And I'm really excited to be a part of the panel today to actually learn a lot from my fellow panelists. Well, I'm different, not from the perspective of the business, but I think broadly, even from the same, from the job of communicating and convincing your audience. I think, irrespective it is a B2C business or a B2B business, I think challenge for creative doesn't really change, right? In my head, rather, I would say, I think all the panelists today, largely everybody is from a tech or .com business. I think creatives have become your actual moment of truth, right? Where you're not physically interacting with anything in a real world except for the creative, right? So I think in that sense, it's very very important in terms of design aspect. I think I'm different in the sense that I'm not a traditional design person. To your point, and I think people with experience in pure design like Rohit and Rajat, I'm really looking forward to learn from them. But as a marketer, I've always held design supremely important, right? Unless you're able to create that consistent way of communicating across touch points, marketing will fall apart, right? So design has been supremely important, either B2C or B2B, and more so for tech businesses like ours.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
great. So good to see that convergence in opinion. But I think throughout this panel, we might see slightly differing and diverse opinions. That's really how we learn. So on to Srijan, would love to hear from you. Now, of course, at Coca-Cola, you're taking on a new role. So some thoughts from there, we would love to hear. Before this, when you were at Zomato, that's also known to be an extremely visual company. Their brand is just quite iconic as well. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think first of all, would like to thank every panelist for putting in those points. I couldn't disagree to any of those. So definitely consistent templatizing, the kind of essence you're using for any of those creative, that templatization. So when we talk about creative, it's not about the visual, it's about the sense, it's about other elements also. It's more about music or the tone you're using along with that, the voiceover you're using along with that. Because in our business, it really counts a lot how everything comes together and takes a shape of conversation that you really want to touch base with your consumer. Apart from that, I would like to highlight this point that creative refresh, when we are specifically calling out creative refresh, in the tech industry, the kind of investments we are doing day in, day out on our multiple campaigns, there is no set definition of creative refresh. Will you come to me and say someday, hey, a week is good enough time? No, I would come back to you and say, don't look at weeks, look at the reach you have made. You look at the frequency you have achieved, look at the fatigue that it has come to. And I think in today's world, it's very easy to look at all those metrics to judge whether those end metrics, because in the end, all of us are driving towards one metric is CLTV, along with the revenue that we can earn. So it really means that how that creative is being used to shell out what it's meant to do. So I think reach, frequency is of utmost important. Definitely, duration comes after that. If you spend enough on a particular creative, fatigue will come into. Rest assured, the templatizing helps in reaching out to your consumer in a very efficient way, and mind recall and everything it takes lesser time if you have standardized or templatized your form. So I would like to summarize it in this. Yeah.
Absolutely. And for unicorns, it's especially important because you're a brand. People know you as something. Creative refresh can go the other extreme where one piece of content looks totally different from the other. So that is one more thing that you probably want to avoid doing. And that's something we'll come to during the later part of the conversation. But Srijan, from your vantage point, want to understand one more thing before we move on to the showcase, which is that could you share any anecdotes or any insights into how you've used creative refresh in the past and what sort of, because this whole topic is about growth, can you talk about having done creative refresh for campaigns, how has it led to growth, and what makes you believer in it, or actually not a believer in it if you don't really believe creative refresh actually leads to growth? Would love to hear any anecdotes or any specific campaign insight.
I think very valid question. I would keep it a little generic so that it's easy for everyone to imply, given coming from the tech background. In an FMCG CPG, it's always difficult to find out the problem area of the consumer at a very nuanced level. But in a tech organization, given you have PI data of the consumer, it becomes very important to understand what your consumers are really looking forward to hear from you. Not every time pushing, but understanding what your consumer are really looking forward from you as a brand, where to stand. So all of firms in my past history of refresh has totally gone in directional sense of what my consumer wants to see. Just to give a simple linear example, we do a lot of insights, reading, surveys through a consumer to understand, hey, if you saw this ad, what was your takeaway? What would you want to, in this parameter of 5 key messages, what would be the takeaway message for you for this? Given the tech background, and like, again, I'm reiterating this line because this is very important. Once you look at the data, things become very easy for you because there's a lot of investment that goes in terms of content curation, deploying, and think of it like your tons and tons of media monies are going behind it. So that's very important. In the duration of lockdown and everything, we came to know that, hey, safety is the aspect everyone is looking forward to. Everyone wants that they whatever is getting delivered, it's purely safe. So should we communicate that? Yes, we should. But how it should come like it cannot come like as explicit as it is. It has to combine with multiple things. Post that, in terms of metrics and everything, we have really seen things moving, not only from the first step of awareness to the end level of CLTV, we have seen things moving. So hence, consuming those insights, understanding those insights, putting it into your creative comms really helps. Apart from that, would also like to highlight one more bit of it since we are on that point. The customization or personalization of creative really plays a vital role. So we all keep on talking about remarketing, but when we talk about dynamic remarketing to a user who was really interested in some product, but they didn't happen to buy at that time. If you do that movement in that 1 or 2 hour, you reach out to that consumer. That again is your importance of that comms at that particular instance. We have seen drastic movement in CTR given dynamic remarketing with the help of our marketing partners. So I think, yes, it really helps. Understand the insights, go with it, then only implement, because there's a lot of budget that rides on this conversation.
Thanks, Srijan. I think that high-level view definitely helps and set the context for what we are going to do next, which is go down to a very low level, right? Because now we want to go into specific campaigns, specific creatives, and talk through those. So, Sonali, would you mind sharing the screen and setting up the presentation? So, Rohit, we'll start off with you. Would love to do a deep dive into this set of creatives, hear from you, why some of these choices were made, what benefits you got out of it, if anything flopped, would love to hear that as well, whatever you are open to sharing.
Absolutely. So during the next few minutes, I'll take you through our campaign journey. So as we discussed in, somebody mentioned that in this fast-paced digital environment, where people process visual information much faster than the text, it is imperative to take the route of overall creative approach refresh, and only campaign is one of such examples. So it is really important how creatively you are expressing a regular moment or a festival that every brand is doing, and in this case Holi. So we started with a single notification. So single notification was sent every day for 5 days. So hence, automatic visual refresh of creatives happened. So every day we are sending a new notification with new colors. One day blue, one day yellow, red, and green with the various communication angle to it. And single entry point was to the app homepage, which was directed to the trip ideas, which improved our unique visitors count. So how we started? So 25th, the campaign got started. It was a 5-day campaign. So on 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. So we did one color notification. And on 29th, we did a mailer and notification of all colors. So maybe you can switch on to the another slide and we can see the mailer. So in that way, we refreshed our visual communication every day, not just the creative. So we did only one mailer and did app homepage and CLM refresh. But we could have, we could have sent 5 emailers per day, but we chose a different approach. So sometimes choosing less is also important. Hence, we chose different assets to drive better effectiveness. And hence the creative refresh requirement itself goes down. So we can always choose various platforms when doing a 360-degree campaign effectively to drive one common result. So another example, which is on the another slide, is Janmashtami creative. So can you move on to the another slide, please? Yeah. So this is another beautiful example of visual storytelling and creative thought refresh. So it also got featured as on various social media channels, Social Samosa, Social Media Dissect, and other few. So in a nutshell, so we don't often refresh our creatives, but we refresh our overall creative approach, is what I want to share here.
Got it, Rohit. So Sonali, if you go back a couple of slides. Yeah, so Rohit, what you were saying was that on a daily basis, these creatives were being refreshed, correct?
Yeah, so every day we were sending one new notification. So the creative hence got refreshed.
Yeah, I would love to understand, why these color choices, and was there any audience preference to any of those? And especially as the next section is going to focus on metrics, did you see any special preference based on any colors or things like that?
So it was just defined as per the moment. We chose Holi, so hence different colors and different communication was also designed as per the moment. So if you can see that blue burse, bhige aapke, so just giving a Bollywood tonality touch to it,
right,
and yet showcasing the colors, to the user. And on the last day, if you can see that fourth creative, we revealed what is beautiful blues, gorgeous greens, dazzling yellows, and ravishing reds. So these were the refresh. So as discussed previously, it was templatized. So this is the template for this particular campaign, if you can see. So, but we refreshed the background and the color tonality also changed. However, we kept the brand tonality and design guidelines, intact as we do for the brand.
Got it. So looks like, Rohit, you and team, just because Holi was coming up and seasonal marketing is a big thing for most marketers, you would have planned this entire campaign. Then this set of templates would have been created. You would have planned for each day what content has to be created. Can you talk a little bit about how this was complemented with, let's say, in-app content? This is a push, but any in-app content or any on a third-party website, any social or things like that, how was it complemented?
So if you go to another slide, there was a lot of user engagement happening, and it was definitely picked on social big time, and people they shared mosaic of their vacation pictures and photographs, and they were also publishing in a same manner how we made the creative. So sometimes it's not just not the metrics, but engagement results are also proof of the pudding that it is a successful campaign. So yes, this is what I want to say.
Got it. And this level of almost daily changes, our next panelists will talk about that because they are big time into those kinds of things. But in your case, do you typically do almost daily level of creative changes, or was that something of a new thing for you?
So existing campaign, we don't do daily changes. For every new campaign, yes, we make a new creative for every new campaign.
Got it. And mind shedding any light, if it is not confidential, just sort of, did you see any more lift than usual just because every day something different looking was going out?
Yes, we saw a very high engagement rate. That's what I can share here. We really got a very good engagement. In fact, one of the best campaigns so far.
Got it. So again, I don't think that this is necessarily a recipe that, every day do something different. I think what you had done was exactly in the context of Holi, in the context of days of week, the fact that it was all leading up to something which had colors in it. I think all of that put together, I don't think this is necessarily a copy paste idea that somebody could take, but the thought process, hopefully all of the audience members got. So
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing that, Rohit.
Thank you.
Great. So over to you, Rajat. Would love to hear from you.
Yes, hi. So as my esteemed colleague from travel and tourism said, travel and tourism being a very experiential area where design is targeted to build on that experiential quality. How do you do it in the service industry where you have services, some which have high consumption, high likability, some which are utilitarian, which may not have that kind of likability, but definitely still necessary to make your life easier. So at Urban Company, our approach was more methodical. We follow our business very up close in terms of the consumers that are engaging with us, with the people who are joining us, people who are downloading our app. Where do they go? What is the first checkpoint? What is the first service that they avail? Do they stay within one service or do they go multi-services? Right. So accordingly, the way we follow our consumer behavior is how we plug it into design. What essentially we did is once we have, since we have an understanding of the business, what we wanted to do was we wanted to package our creatives into an ecosystem that thrives, an ecosystem that can evolve. And in order to make that ecosystem, we built on the process of systems thinking, which is what I previously spoke about, which is a very meticulous balance of brand, a brand device, color, typography, imagery, and composition and layout, and how it all comes together. A brand device essentially is that signature that keeps appearing and reappearing, which helps reinforces your brand, builds on brand recall, allows people to slowly engage with your brand, and then at a certain point realize that this is coming out of brand X. An example a parallel example of a device is how Vodafone did the rhombus. That device became so popular that everybody understood it. So for us, the probability was to build the ecosystem and create templates for business as usual, create templates for sales, create templates for organic posts, and any other kind of bucket, whether in social, whether in digital. We also took the system ahead and moved it into outdoor. It came up as an end slate on video. So it's a formula that has to work across all touch points. So what you're seeing right here is essentially a timeline of how we refreshed creatives, right? So if you look at the creative on the extreme right, that's how it all started. And the idea here was to understand what is the consumer really taking away, right? Is the consumer getting a sense of the business, right? Of the service itself? What is the service that's going to be shown? And slowly, the way this works is, how do you derive what is the current need, right? Is the need to highlight the service? Is it the need to highlight the price point? Is it the need to highlight the brand? Is it the need to highlight the property? And what you're seeing as the subsequent examples here is a clear progression. So what we also drove towards was simplicity is key. A lot of times when you're looking to, like I was explaining earlier, the attention span of the consumer is becoming smaller by the day. How do you drive in otherwise very competitive market to drive in time drive presence, right? So do you want to create something that keeps coming to that keeps repeating itself, which automatically creates a remembrable value? Do you want to highlight a particular service and bring it to the forefront? Do you want to highlight that price point? So do you want to show who's the person coming home who's going to do the service? So we also troubleshooted by looking at previous creators, looking at where we could have done better, bringing it up close, bringing it so that the consumer can literally touch and feel that this is what we're going to receive when this person comes home. This is what we're going to receive. If you go to the next slide, here, if you notice, so the top right corner, that is how we started. And if you see that there's a lot of information, and we pride ourselves on giving as much information as possible to make it simpler for someone to consume. And we're looking at a job like painting, right? A painting is a very seasonal affair. You're not going to do it all the time. You're definitely not going to do it in the rainy season. So when you actually want to build consideration for a business that's very seasonal, how do you want to build that? So we wanted to start with something where we have ample amount of information within a system for someone to take away, right? As we moved forward, and as you can see some of the other businesses and the way we have sort of captured it, we have captured for immediacy. When we moved, if you look at the AC servicing creative, over there, we wanted to create that assurance, that final assurance that when your job is done, you have that smile on your face, right? And we wanted to create a very strong presence for brand, because this is the end slate. This is the last bit that you'll capture. And we also noticed that, people would be watching a commercial maybe at the beginning. They might catch it in the middle. They might be capturing it at the very end. How do we manage to keep a brand presence alive and then also end it with that punch? Moving forward in time, moving even more simpler and even more immediate was to make it clean. We have the commercial running and all the way till the end, and let the end be a final brand takeaway. So that brand, it's a simple, well packaged, easy to understand and consumable end slate that people can take away and then drive and drive consideration through there. If you move forward, here is a take at our in our banners. So the one in blue is where it all started, right? And as we slowly saw the evolution, these are monthly properties, right? Now monthly properties like Super Saver Week kicks in the beginning of the month for the first 7 days. We also started realizing that in our international businesses, this was kicking in at the end of the month. So inadvertently, we had to build on excitement. We had to build on the immediacy that that this is payday has come and here's your time to avail services. So we wanted to build that energy and excitement. As you can see, the creatives to the left are what essentially do that. We also added, mind you, a few extra things to reinforce this campaign. We started with something called a hero banner, which is the Super Saver Week Best Deals of the Month, leading into the category banners. And as you can see, there are category banners where the image is clip masked inside this device. And there is a category banner where the image comes out of the device. These are all hacks. These are all creative hacks to create that sense of immersiveness, that these services that we offer are immersive. The people who come to your house can be trusted. We will do a professional job. We have the state-of-the-art technology. We have the tools. We have the expertise. We have the skills. So when you're trying to capture it in that one little banner, and you're trying to drive consideration, how do you capture it? So these are all very formulaic design systems that we have created. And that's what I have for you today.
Amazing, Rajat. So I think you've covered a lot of ground that we would have otherwise talked about later, which is how do you create a feel of a brand while at the same time doing creative refresh, right? Because you can see a consistent look even as you look at them separately, but when they're all seen together, you can clearly tell they're from the same brand. Can you shed some more light on how often some of these refreshes are done? Like how long do you just stick to your guns and say that, no, this is the look, let's stick with this for some time? How often do you change the look?
Right. So what we start with is to create a cheat sheet for ourselves, right? Something that we can follow, something that goes business as usual. That, here's a framework for banners, here's a framework for social media, here's a framework for outdoors, here's a framework for end slaves. What are some key do's? What are some key don'ts? What have we observed in the past, right? So that being the base level creative, which essentially is used on a daily basis. Then we come to the layer where we want to drive some experiments. We want to see what our consumer is thinking, right? So we want to say articulate deep cleaning services, and deep cleaning services is a slightly more expensive consideration. How do you drive the professionalism that leads to consideration that, okay, I will be spending X amount of money, but I'm going to get a thorough job, right? So that's where you build in, you take these creative elements and then you highlight that particular thing. So whether if it's the service that you want to highlight, then you take the imagery and you make that the hero, and you have content which is equally the supporting cast, and you work, and that works together. So so the imagery and the price, the offer call out, and whatever partner strip or discount that comes with it. If we are looking at getting someone to trying to boost sales, right? So for example, a high moving category like salon, how do we build freshness in it, is to try and highlight the service itself. So here the imagery takes a little bit of the back step, and the service itself it becomes takes the hero presence, which means that content becomes larger. So text becomes larger, price point becomes larger, image plays a supporting role, so that when you're scrolling through, you actually come across and say, oh yeah, I'm considering getting a threading done or a waxing done. Wow, so Urban Company is giving this at a special discount. Oh, by the way, it's also Super Saver Week, right? So Super Saver Week, a special discount equals how do we package that, and how do we sort of bring that to the forefront? These are a couple of strategies.
Very cool, Rajat. So what is really heartening for me is that you are a design person through and through, but most of your language is oriented towards what the user wants. And really that's what really drives growth, right? It's not really only marketing. It's not really only design. So beautifully done. Over to you, Vivek.
Thanks, Satish. So for all those who are, just to set up the context, we are into both B2C and C2B. So from the perspective of both user who wants to sell his car, and from the perspective of the user who wants to buy the car, right? So I try to cover both the side of the things. When I think about creative, since my primarily responsibilities are always associated with how much performance I am delivering out of it, right? So 100% the target is that only. So for us it is like how we are driving, what messaging should we float over the internet, that if somebody is thinking about selling a car, and if somebody is thinking about buying the car, whether we are communicating that pain points that user was facing at the time of selling or buying the car, right? So mostly things revolves around what were the pain points, and before going into that, before deciding what messaging should in which language, how we should communicate with the customer, it is always better to understand what actual problem a particular user is facing, right? For seller side, it is like you want to sell your car, but what actually you are looking for, you are looking for that you should be able to sell it in an hour, right? It should not be like in a normal traditional way, you are visiting this dealer and that dealer, and they are throwing some price, and you are not able to negotiate it. So what we are communicating is that there are more than 400 500 dealers who are associated with us, and we are doing an online auctions, and you can negotiate the price. So that is the one point when you are selling the car. Another pain point is in a normal traditional way, what happened is that you sold your car, and then somebody is telling you you will get the money after 10 days, 15 days, right? So we try to cover that through the messaging, like, you will get the money in next 1 hour. So you just have to, stay at our center. Somebody will inspect the car, and we will let you know the actual price of the car, and we will be, transfer the fund in an hour only. So mostly things revolves around how we are helping out customers in their journey to sell the car, because it is also specifically Indian culture. We really love, our the first vehicle that we have bought, right? And there are emotion associated with it, and we want to make it, more and more, rememberable point. I mean, if you are selling to us, then you will get that kind of experience where you are happy with the price and you are happy with the processes, and then you can decide on whether you want to go for another car, a new car, or maybe another used car, and then there also we can help you out. So another perspective to it is that, earlier we were doing in English language only. Later on, we find out that vernacular is a big game changer. We tried it around 1.5 years back, and for one reason in one particular language, Hindi, and later on we opened it for, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Bengali, and 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 you won't believe the performance was almost 50% more than what we were usually getting through the English creative.
That's
So
pretty
another
incredible.
point that I will add is that, vernacular is a really big game changing things. Uh, and third point I would like to highlight is that, how you are understanding the customers. Uh, I mean, what exactly customer is looking for. So we get that information through the reviews. Reviews, what information is user putting for the app. We are collecting that information through the surveys. We are we are collecting uh, we are collecting those kind of feedback by directly calling them. Like, if you have to randomly picking up some data and then calling them, what exactly you will look for if you have to sell your car. So that is why this creative talks about, you know uh, we say that, it's you can buy your car, but when you want to purchase a car, what exactly you look for? Assortment, right? uh, uh, what how many cars we have, and the range that we have in terms of models. Next factor will be quality, whether the car you are going to get is actually doing well in terms of, all those inspection parameters. And we are covering that messaging through, delivering to letting the customer knowing that we are doing inspection on more than 150 points. So that is another way of, really connecting with their pain points. And the third point is uh, about the price. We are telling customers through these creative uh, designs only, like, you are going to get the best price of the car. And third pain point is when you are purchasing the car. uh, People really recently, few months back, we went online. So car buying journey is completely online for us. So how can we create that kind of trust among the user? Because it's really tough decision to buy a car online. Nobody thought about it till the time it was normal commodity. Otherwise, uh, it was really hard decision to buy a car online. And in fact, when that was introduced internally, floated with the management, so we ourselves were not so much sure about how to go about it. So based upon those insights only, we devise a mechanisms, like, we ask the customer to keep the car with them for 7 days, and if they do not like it, they can return it, and the whole amount will be refunded completely. So all these pain points we try to, communicate through our designs, and how we are reaching uh, at those decisions. So there is a regular communication between performance team, design team, and the branding team. So we try to incorporate all those factors. They are giving their input from the branding perspective, so design teams comes up with their creative perspective, and then we are sharing those things with how actually the things are moving on, what kind of engagement we are getting it, and we are tracking it till down the funnel, how much actual performance we are getting out of it. And then we are deciding accordingly whether to continue with a particular creative or whether we have to drop off this and then move ahead with the next creative.
Vivek, could you shed some light on what is the frequency of this dialogue? Because
so
you could
for
get
us,
extremely
yes,
data-driven, and every few days you are itching to make changes, or is there some more scientific way to it?
For us, Satish, I would not say it is so frequently for us, because there are 4 or 5 things that majorly drive the decision for a user, uh, for both sides, C2B and B2C. So we usually do refreshes in the range of 15 to 20 days. It is not like every day or every week we are doing some changes, and that decision is also associated with how much engagement I am getting out of it. So sometimes it might be like 10-15 days. There is a, I would say, there is no specific rule of thumbs. You should continuously monitor your metrics. If you are getting result out of it, if you are at a particular threshold of what CTR you are getting, what frequency you are showing the creatives, and over the times, sometimes it happens that you are spending huge, and the same creative is delivered to user more than 4 times, 5 times. So that also sometimes drive that decisions of continuing with that creative. Like in this slide mentions, we another way of looking at the things is create that kind of urgency, like Rajat mentioned and some other colleague mentioned. This creative on right hand side, we are saying that over the years price of the cars will keep diminishing, right? So we create that kind of urgency. You should go for selling it right now. On the left hand side, we are saying that we have huge assortment. We know that people are looking for when they are deciding, I have to look for a particular car, although most of the times it's back of their mind, like they are looking for a particular brand and variations. But still, when there is a number always performs better than a usual way of communicating the things. And we have seen that for this creative, where we have mentioned 50,000 plus verified cars, we get huge CTR, and ultimately down the funnel the performance was also good. These are the 2 things I would like to mention from our perspective, maybe based upon the analysis, because that the second creative on the right was based upon our internal study. We have find out that over the years, what percentage of the cars, the price get reduced, and then we try to convey this message to the user. If you are delaying the decision, then you are losing out so much money. So if you are thinking about it, then you should sell it today.
Got it. Thanks, Vivek. So I think you've covered a lot of questions that people are asking. The Q&A box is also going pretty crazy. A lot of questions there. I think you've already touched upon several of those points, but we'll come back to some more of these things as part of the Q&A. So if nothing else, I'll move on to Mohit.
Sure. Yeah.
Perfect. Mohit, floor is yours.
Yeah, so I think I just want to summarize what I've been hearing from all the panelists, and I think it's a great coincidence that I think all of us have been able to cover the entire lay of land, and there are complementary things that we are talking about. To begin with, I think what Rajat talked about, brand campaigns and creative refresh, generally, as a marketer, as a designer, the frequency of refresh and the principles would stay true to at least one duration of the campaign, right? I think those are very good examples what Rohit shared. What Rajat talked about is essentially the fundamentals of how do you create a unique brand identity, and Udaan has been on a very similar journey and trajectory, right? I think one of the sub points of the discussion is the design-led growth for unicorns, and I think it's very important for brands like ours, which are at such an early stage of business. How do you create that identity which is distinctive and ownable over a period of time, right? And that comes with consistency. That comes with doing the same thing again and again and keeping it refreshed so that you don't bore your buyers and audience. I think great example what Rajat shared, and I think since Srijan is on the call, so you can't not mention Coke, and I think Coke is a great example of a brand having done that consistently over decades, right? You don't build brands over years, you build brands over decades. And I think Coke is a great example of that, where probably today they don't even show the Coke bottle, where they just show 2 hands coming together in the shape of holding a bottle, and everybody can guess it's a Coke ad, right? I think that's the power in terms of how do you create consistency with your design, how do you keep it alive over such a long period of time, and which invariably becomes associated with your brand. So I think another great example, I think what Vivek was talking about again touched upon very fundamental challenge of how do you create a new category altogether where there are no category codes. There is new way of interacting and engaging with your audience, and these codes are still evolving, right? And I think that's again a very complementary example to what I have, which would talk about essentially in-app creatives, right? And I think it's amazing to see that by coincidence, we didn't discuss it beforehand, but we are talking about very complementary examples today here, right? So yeah, I think at the end of the day, the example that I thought would add value to the discussion is more on the high volume creatives that we do as an e-com platform, which Udaan is. And these are in-app creatives. I'm just going to take 2 examples to talk about specifically to the point of the discussion today, right? Now, I think just taking a step back in terms of how do you kind of put certain principles when the playbook is still evolving, right? There's no ready formula or design that would work. And Udaan, again, is a very, very diverse brand to work on because we are a horizontal e-com brand. We are cutting through across categories, across verticals. So I've just taken up, for instance, lifestyle here, but we have another 15 categories on the platform, and each of them would have their own specific nuances, right? So what are the first principles kind you would lay down, which would help you scale this whole, this whole process up? So one, you invest in very good teams. So you build that whole, army of very strong team of designers within Udaan, right? In terms of then laying down principles, right? So what kind of overall structure your creators would carry, what kind of typography they would carry, what kind of color themes they would carry, how you would keep it simple enough and exhaustive so that you're able to communicate everything that you want to communicate, right? Now, we also have a tendency to over communicate sometimes. But again, I think, so these are certain broad first principles kind of thinking that we have at Udaan kind of, put together, and we are continuously evolving on this journey. I won't say that we have a ready formula or playbook that would take care of everything, but largely we are kind of getting there in terms of solving these day-to-day problems, right? I think the other perspective before I take through, talk a little more in detail about these examples is to understand your audience. I think that's super, super important, right? And I think that's where the point you began my introduction in terms of how is it different for Udaan. Obviously, for B2B audience, you're talking to a very different audience versus a Make My Trip or an Urban Clap would talk to, right? I think the insight which probably I can share and which people would be able to appreciate, the journey where a retailer today in India is, right, in terms of commerce, in terms of online commerce, is probably where we all on the panel and the audience today as consumers were a few years ago, right? So we were there at certain point in time, and now we are very comfortable in terms of doing all possible commerce that we do. Whereas a retailer in India today is taking those early baby steps in terms of getting on that journey, right? So while we have created an impact, but again it's a long journey, and sky's the limit, right? So to get the buyers to change their traditional way of doing business and try out a very different new way, which is much simpler, which makes their life much more easier, is of course a journey, right? Now, I think that's another important aspect to mention. Why? Because the decision making here has a very big impact on his day-to-day life, right? Versus say making an impact, and I'm not putting down any other brand or platform, but say if I buy a t-shirt or a shoe, it's much easy. It doesn't impact me so much, right? If I don't like it, I can easily replace it. I can send it back. I can get my money back. Versus a B2B platform has a much more impact in terms of decision making for an audience because it's his working capital that is going to get locked in terms of decision that he would end up taking on the platform, right? So I think that's really important. And the idea in terms of the way we try to put together our content and creatives across all the other use cases and specific to this one example is how do you make the decision making very easier for your audience, right? How do you give him the right amount of information in the shortest span of time? We all know the time spans, etc., in the context of amount of content everybody's consuming. So I think that those are the key principles we try and keep in mind when we look at if there is a need for creative refresh, or what do you talk next, or whatever the brand objective might be, right? So these are just few examples to kind of bring alive the point. Say if you were to talk about one particular category, one small or big brand, for that matter, now you would have to have a very high frequency in such use case, because I'm trying to get into the consideration set of a particular retailer in X particular geography with Y particular brand, being a B2B e-com marketplace that Udan is, right? So you need to have a very high frequency churn of creatives there, right? So what you're seeing probably is an example of keeping largely the message intact, but keeping it fresh, because every time the buyer comes on the app, you want to, try a different way for him if he has not already interacted with this particular, say, brand or product in use case, right? So I think that's broadly what the idea here to show this was. When it comes to in-app creatives, when it comes to same brand creatives, the frequency would generally be higher. You try to keep the content more fresh than you would do it for a brand campaign or so on and so forth. I think the other example, Sonali, on the next slide is essentially when we're not talking about a particular brand, but we're talking about a particular category, right? Now, again, you would see some similarity here in terms of the construct of these creatives, right? But there are two different examples. Obviously, on the left, you have t-shirts, on the right, you have some examples of footwear. But the idea here is to build that category consideration over a period of time, right? So even if you were to just probably read the dates, it's not very readable, but we don't change these category-led creatives that often, as I showed you the examples in the previous slide, right? Where I'm talking about one brand. But say the idea here is to talk about that you can also buy t-shirts, you can also buy footwear, right? And you would get good competitive prices. So I would try to keep largely the framework of the design similar, so that it's easier for the buyer to quickly see if he sees this in a form of a banner or if he sees this in a form of a widget. So there is no time lost in terms of registering what I'm first trying to tell him, right? And then us expecting the audience to take an action on it, right? So I think these are the two examples, but I think, yeah, as I summarized, probably, I think coincidentally, we've been able to cover the larger lay of land. So yeah, I think that's it from me.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mohit. A lot of interesting insights shared by everybody. Like I said, Q&A box is going crazy. I know it's a little unfair if you don't go through a lot of questions. We are at time, but maybe 3 or 4 questions we'll go through. But the fact is, a lot of them were already answered. Let me quickly jump onto the first question. I'll give the floor to Srijan. Nikesh Rati asked, how do you identify that the creative fatigue is happening? And what is the best course of action? Do you reduce exposure? Do you stop them altogether? Pause for a few days? Anything else? Would love to hear.
See, it depends how you're defining how creative is working. For someone, it can be a first PTR. Someone it could be install. Someone it will be lifetime value. So which cycle you are into and what objective you're driving, keep that into a mind. And definitely when that particular metric seems going off the track, is the time you need to take the action. As I initially mentioned, that don't look at the duration, look at the number of exposures, look at the fatigue, look at how many impressions it has delivered, how many reach it has delivered, look at all those aspects, and definitely your end goal metric towards your driving, whether it's installed, whether it's your CTR, whether it's your customer lifetime value. So you have to look at where brand is trying to optimize and what exactly brand is trying to achieve. So you have to find that and accordingly take an action. There is no fixed set of duration of these to comment. It's all exposure and how your metrics are moving with time. If they're depleting, take an action, change it, and run it A/B test whenever you're switching it to the another one.
Perfect. I think that makes a lot of sense. So this one I think is for I think the best person to talk about this could be Rohit. Sandeep from Pick Your Trail says, how would you measure the impact of creatives from both design as well as marketing perspective? And how do you really apply these learnings in future campaigns?
So, to answer this, design or a particular creative, its performance is dependent not just upon the creative, but there are several aspects, attached to it. For example, what offer do we have? What we are communicating to the audience? What is the variety of package? In our case, we are showcasing whether it's good value for money to the offer, and how crisply have you communicated the offer and the creative that you have made. So alone, a creative cannot contribute to the performance, but it is part of the whole process.
Rajat, a very specific question for you, which is that how important is it to show a very large logo in the creatives, like while scrolling and looking at it at a glance? So specifically for you, in some of the creatives, this person noticed that the UC logo is quite small. It also does not say urban company. So how important is that? Would love to hear.
So good question. The reason for having the stamp is because you're already within the channel. So including the full identity becomes a little redundant as we move forward. So there was a simplification that was done. In terms of the size, the important thing to sort of understand is the placement and the spatial planning of the layout, right? So where exactly does your brand rest, right? So what our industry has also sort of cultured us to sort of is on our eye movement. Our eye automatically goes to the top left corner or the top right corner. So it positions itself to be able to strategically look at the size of the brand over there. We have included the urban company branding from time to time when we realize that we are entering into a market or maybe entering into a category where people don't know that urban company also offers this. There's no set rhyme scheme as to the size of the logo, like it incrementally becomes bigger and bigger as the size of the creative becomes bigger. We also want to ensure that we have a very meticulous balance of all the other ingredients that come along with the brand. Because once the brand is understood, then the next order of business is what are you here to offer, right? So when you're trying to balance that out, the size of the branding changes from creative to creative. Like for example, if we take it into a hoarding, where we are going into a tier 2 city where the brand is still nascent, right? It's still young or it's still just coming. The brand identity becomes really big and allows for prominence. Whereas when we are looking at the social media creatives, when we are inside a channel, then we do take that liberty to try and highlight the service, or for that matter, the discount or the sale, or whatever. And as the question actually implies, it's an ongoing experimentation where we do try to experiment by saying, okay, let's make the brand a little bit bigger and see how that performs. Right. So everything is according to performance. So what we rested out to now is the size of the stamp. At what size it is currently is because the consumer eye has sort of rested onto that the brand is urban company. Let me see what I really want to choose from the wide array of services that the brand has.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rajat. We have time for two last quick questions. This one is for Vivek. Niharika Shahi asks, the communication used for vernacular banners seems similar to what you do in English. If yes, how do you decide what communication to use for each language?
So Niharika, yes, for us mostly we just try to convey the message in their language only. So that is the overall goal, and it is around converting the message, but we are trying to deliver it in English, and at similar we try to portray it through other languages. So again to reiterate it, it's most of the time it is same, but yeah, we just do small tweaks.
Okay, perfect. And the last question is for Mohit. How do you personalize the creative strategy for different target audiences? The example here given may not make sense for Udam, but please speak more broadly. This one example talks about 18-year-olds versus 40-year-olds. I don't know if those are target segments for you, but how do you really segment and change the creative strategy accordingly?
I mean, there are a lot of ways we do segment, and it varies by category, it varies by the journey of the buyer on its life cycle, right? And across markets as well. Essentially, if I understand the question behind the question in terms of how does it impact the design and the overall communication, I think, so yeah, I mean, there are multiple ways we dissect, and then we try and match in terms of, getting the message through, keeping those first principles I talked about previously largely intact, right? Where you're not compromising on the message delivery and considering the understanding of the buyers, where they are in their overall ecosystem in terms of getting used to transacting online and doing commerce. So the intent is to keep it very, very simple wherever they are in their life cycle, right? And get the message through as quickly and as simply as possible. So, I mean, yeah, to answer broadly, that's what
we do. Absolutely. You have to balance your brand. You have to keep that consistency at the same time, Taylor. So there's no one.
It's like juggling ball. Yeah, there are multiple things. So you have to deliver on the brand consistency. The brand needs to get registered. The key message specific to that category and where that buyer is in its journey needs to, come across and make sense to the buyer when he sees it. So there are a lot of things that you have to balance. And I think it's an ongoing thing.
And ultimately, it's all about growth. So this design, all of this creative strategy, everything else, ultimately, if it does
everything
not
that you do in marketing has always been about growth. And I mean, yes, we are all talking about growth marketing, but marketing was always about growth. Fundamentally, that mindset, I don't think has changed. But yes, this has become more acceptable how people look at it. So
Absolutely.
That's fine.
So now I think, given everything that we have covered, I think the audience would have seen how different unicorns are using growth as a part of the overall design, as a part of this overall growth that they're delivering, how they're using analytics and internal processes, how they work. So I think we covered a lot of ground. There are still many, many more questions, but I don't think we'll have time to get to that. So Sonali, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Srijan. Thanks for leading the panel so well. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, all the panel members indeed for taking time out. And I'm sure the audience has had a lot to take back. I myself, as a user, I land up to all your websites and apps and notifications. So nobody really, knows what really goes into these creatives and what really goes into the marketing that we are seeing, which actually pushes us to use a service or buy a product. So I think that's something which has been really insightful, and I'm sure the audience also over here would resonate the same. And the diverse perspectives that we have had, from e-com, travel and tourism, used car services, consumer services, FMCG. So I think some diverse perspectives that we did dive in, and it was indeed a great 1 hour that we could sort of get these insights from you. Thank you so much for giving in all your time today. Indeed, a pleasure hosting you. And thanks to our esteemed attendees as well for joining in, tuning in live. We could not take all the questions, but I'm sure we have answered a couple, and we'll take rest offline over an email. And till then, in case you have any inputs, please keep in coming. Please keep your suggestions coming on the future topics, and stay tuned to ETBrandEquity. Thank you.